Welcome to Sayers and Secrets. When a revered senator passes away under peaceful circumstances, no one expects his will to become the most dangerous document in the city. But a missing codicil, a sealed drawer in his study, and a sudden reversal of fortune hint that the testament holds a secret worth killing for. Who tampered with the legacy, and what truth did the senator try to protect from beyond the grave? Have you ever suspected that the most important words are the ones left out? Let us know in the comments. And if you crave more cunning, logic, and layered deceit, be sure to subscribe. Close the study door, steady your breath, and let the unraveling begin. Chapter 1. The Testament Visitor. Archie Goodwin here. Wednesday started the way all peaceful Wednesdays should. Fritz was marinating veal in the kitchen, Wolfe was neck-deep in the Aurelian, and I was on the verge of testing my luck with a crossword and a cup of very illegal second coffee. That delicate balance of domestic tranquility was broken at precisely 10:42 a.m., when the front bell rang like it meant business. I opened the door to a man in a camel-colored topcoat, face scrubbed clean but stiff with worry. The way he scanned the room told me he wasn't her to sell encyclopedias. "Archie Goodwin," he asked. "Got it in one. You've reached Nero Wolfe's detective agency. If you've got a crime, a corpse, or a confession, you're in the right place. I'm Edgar Belden. I represent the estate of the late Senator Thane T. Markham." Now when a name like Thane T. Markham shows up before lunch, something's afoot. The senator had died just 6 days ago, choking on shrimp cocktail at a charity gala uptown. The tabloids chewed on it for 48 hours, mostly speculating about political infighting and cholesterol. But this wasn't the kind of man who sent his lawyer to Wolfe's brownstone unless something had started to stink worse than the seafood tower. I led Belden into the office, where Wolfe sat like a stone idol behind his desk, eyes still half glued to the spine of his book. "Mr. Wolfe," I said, "this is Edgar Belden, legal wrangler for the dearly departed Senator Thane T. Markham." Wolfe didn't look up. "Take a chair, Mr. Belden," briefly, succinctly. Belden did as instructed, his coat wrinkling awkwardly as he perched on the edge of the red leather chair. "There's a codicil in the senator's will," he said. "It's problematic." Wolfe raised one brow, a movement so rare I thought about calling Guinness. Problematic in what regard? It was added 3 days before his death. In it, the senator claims to have enclosed proof of criminal conduct by one of his political associates. The codicil references an enclosed statement and documentation, but when we opened the envelope, there was nothing inside. Wolfe finally shut his book. He folded his hands across his substantial chest. "You're suggesting, Mr. Belden, that someone removed the contents before the will was executed?" "Yes, or that they were never enclosed. Either scenario has," he cleared his throat, "potentially explosive implications." "You have suspects," Wolfe said flatly. "Yes. 4, at least, all with access to the senator's private study where the testament was kept in his personal safe." "And your intention in coming here?" Wolfe asked, the question floating in the air like a spear. "I want to know who took the documents, or if they ever existed. I'm willing to retain your services on behalf of the estate. The senator's reputation, posthumously or otherwise, deserves clarity." Wolfe sighed with such disapproval you'd think someone had just insulted orchids. "I dislike politics, Mr. Belden. It is a cesspool lined with liars, incompetence, and the odor of ambition. However, if Mr. Goodwin chooses to pursue the matter, I shall observe." That was Wolfe's version of a handshake and contract in one go. I leaned forward. "Who are the 4 suspects?" Belden didn't hesitate. His personal secretary, Judith Vale. His brother-in-law, George Lanigan. His political aide, Devon Kessler, and his old law partner, Carlton Reed. I scribbled the names down as Wolfe asked, "When may we examine the safe?" "It's been untouched since the discovery. I can take Mr. Goodwin there this afternoon." I saw Wolfe's eyes close, just a flicker, already calculating. "I will require a complete copy of the will, including the codicil," Wolfe said. "I brought it with me." Belden reached into his case and handed over a manila folder. "Archie," Wolfe said, "you will accompany Mr. Belden. Take note of the study's dimensions, furnishing, access points, and the safe itself. Do not touch it until you've taken photographs." "Right," I said, standing. As Belden and I headed for the door, Wolfe added one last note. "And Mr. Belden, should you find that any of your suspects are inclined to dissemble, I advise candor. I do not enjoy obfuscation." Belden nodded, the way you do when you realize you're not entirely in control of your own errand anymore. We stepped out into a grey November wind, and I had the distinct feeling that whatever secrets were buried in the senator's testament, someone had already killed to keep them that way. Chapter 2. The Late Senator's Study. The Markham townhouse on East 68th Street had that dignified, crumbling gravitas you expect from old money and older secrets. Stone facade, wrought iron trim, and a front door that looked like it had seen 3 generations of handshakes and blackmail. Edgar Belden led me up 2 flights to the senator's private study. The man had taste, dark mahogany paneling, green glass lampshades, and bookshelves full of political memoirs. Nobody read, probably not even the ones with the senator's own name on the spine. "Everything's as it was," Belden said, his voice a notch lower now. "We sealed the room once we noticed the envelope was empty. The staff's been instructed to steer clear." I scanned the room. A leather Chesterfield faced a stately desk with clawed feet. On the wall to the right, a painting, colonial-era portrait, hung above a marble fireplace. 2 windows looked out over a courtyard thick with rusting ivy. "What about the safe?" I asked. Belden moved behind the desk and pointed to a panel of wainscoting. With a gentle press, it popped open, revealing a wall-mounted safe. It was unassuming, black, no bigger than a suitcase. Combination lock. Only the senator knew it as far as we know. "How was it opened after his death?" "We had a certified locksmith from the estate's bank open it during the reading. There was only one envelope inside marked Addendum, Private, and it was empty." I crouched beside the safe. No scratches, no scuff marks around the hinges. Clean work. Either someone opened it with the combo or knew how to make it look like they had. I pulled out my camera, snapped shots from 3 angles, and moved to the desk. "He kept documents here?" "Yes. His daily agenda, working files, correspondence. Judith, his secretary, was the only one who had regular access to the drawers." I rifled through the top right drawer. Pens, letter opener, blotting paper. Nothing personal. Middle drawer, empty. Bottom drawer, a locked compartment. I raised an eyebrow at Belden, who shook his head. "We didn't touch that." "Mind if I do?" He hesitated, then gave a reluctant nod. I picked the lock in under 3 minutes with my standard kit. Inside were 3 things: a half-empty bottle of Glenlivet, a photograph of the senator, and a younger man at some kind of gala, and a small ivory-handled revolver. Belden paled when he saw it. "Registered?" I asked. I don't know," he admitted. I carefully wrapped the revolver in my handkerchief and set it aside. "You always find secrets with liquor and pistols. It's just a question of which one pulled the trigger first." Belden didn't laugh. I stood. "Now let's talk about the suspects. When did each of them have access to this room in the last 72 hours before the senator's death?" Belden removed a folded page from his coat. "Judith Vale was here the morning the senator passed. She delivered correspondence and typed notes. She was alone in the room briefly. Kessler met the senator here 2 days prior for a strategy session. George Lanigan visited that same evening, apparently to discuss family finances. Carlton Reed came the day before, alone for over an hour. All 4 of them had potential access," I said. Belden nodded. I moved to the windows and checked the locks. Secure. One of them creaked in the frame, but nothing abnormal. No signs of forced entry. No clever vent or dumbwaiter tricks. Whoever took that document had the combo, or was handed it. I turned back. Anyone outside the suspects? Staff? The housekeeper has a key to the front door but rarely enters the study. She says she hasn't in over a week. Security system? None. Well, you're lucky no one absconded with the furniture, I muttered. I snapped a few more photos. Book spines, desktop, wastebasket contents, and paused when I noticed a torn corner of cream-colored parchment wedged behind the radiator near the desk leg. With gloved fingers, I retrieved it. Belden leaned in. Could that be? Maybe. The scrap had the senator's watermark and what looked like the edge of a typed word, possibly liability, but only the bottom half remained. Do me a favor, I said. Tell no one I found this. Understood. I pocketed the scrap and wrapped up the photos. As we were leaving, Belden spoke again, softer this time. There's more to this than political fallout. The senator confided in me recently, said he feared something was brewing, that someone close was preparing to betray him. He didn't say who, but he was drafting that codicil when he mentioned it. Do you believe it was murder? I asked. I don't know. The shrimp cocktail story seems tidy, doesn't it? I didn't reply, but as I closed the door to the study, I caught a glimpse of the portrait above the fireplace, the colonial figure staring sternly down, and I couldn't help thinking he, too, knew the room was full of lies. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe waited. I dropped the envelope of photos and the parchment scrap on his desk and started summarizing. Wolfe didn't interrupt once, but his eyes, half-lidded as usual, narrowed slightly when I got to the torn parchment. He waited until I finished. This will require more than supposition, he said. I aim to get us facts. Do so. Wolfe leaned back in his chair, and begin with Miss Vale. A secretary is rarely merely a secretary. He was right, and I had a feeling Judith Vale had plenty to say, whether she liked it or not. Chapter 3. Trouble on the 12th floor. I've walked into hotel suites that smelled of perfume, crime, and panic, but the 12th floor suite of the Armitage Hotel was pure politician. Leather chairs, brass lamps, and a bar stocked with bourbon the color of ambition. The man who opened the door looked like he'd run 10 miles in a 3-piece suit. That was Wesley Bartlett, legislative aide to the late Senator Dane Claymore, and the one who'd called me back after my initial inquiry. I suppose you want answers, he said, voice taut as a pulled string. I nodded. Answers, yes. Coffee, maybe. A sense of why a perfectly respectable senator wrote a will that's making people nervous enough to jump off. Balconies, definitely. He didn't laugh. Politicos rarely did unless someone else was losing. He ushered me inside. The place was immaculate, but too immaculate. Not a fingerprint on the crystal decanter, no errant papers on the desk. Either Bartlett was compulsive, or someone had done a clean-up job, and not for spring. On the polished end table sat a single framed photograph. Senator Claymore, smiling beside a woman who was definitely not his wife. No label, just an expression too warm for public relations. I worked with him for 12 years, Bartlett said, pouring himself a drink. Loyal to the end, but not so loyal that you're not shaking in your coal hands now. He gave me a look. I'm not shaking, I'm angry. There are people in Washington and here in New York who think they can twist a man's legacy for their gain. And someone like you might get caught in the gears. He sat. Claymore changed his will 3 weeks before his death. No one was supposed to know. He told me it was just a clarification. But yesterday I got a message slipped under my door. No signature, just one line. He named her. He knew. That's dramatic. Who's her? His hesitation gave me enough to go on. "Ah," I said. "The lady in the photo. I take it that's not Mrs. Claymore." "No," Bartlett admitted. "That's Felice Rand, former aide, fired 2 years ago. Rumors she was more than a staffer. There was an inquiry, but nothing stuck. The senator's wife never bought it, though. Neither did the donors." I paced. If she's in the will, people might want to keep that quiet, or erase it altogether. He poured another drink. "She's not just in the will. She's the main beneficiary." That stopped me. "The main one?" As in everything outside a few minor trusts. His estate, assets, even some political leverage he held in a few foundation boards. "And that wasn't in the previous draft?" "Not a word," Bartlett said grimly. "That woman walks into probate, and there's going to be hell to pay." I took a moment to digest that. "When did you last see Claymore alive?" 4 nights before he died. We had drinks at the Union Club. He was in good spirits. Said he'd tied up loose ends. Loose ends that might unravel a few careers. Bartlett gave me a look that was part dread, part calculation. "The man had secrets, Mr. Goodwin. We all do. But some secrets don't stay buried, especially when someone digs them up with a sharp pen and a notarized document." I left him brooding into his scotch and took the elevator down. Outside the Armitage, the wind had picked up, like the city was whispering warnings no one wanted to hear. I called Wolfe from the payphone on the corner. He picked up on the second ring, which for him might as well be a panic attack. "I take it your legwork bore fruit," he said. "Fruit?" "It's practically an orchard. The late senator left his political empire to a former mistress, and now everyone with a stake is reaching for pruning shares. That is metaphorical and unhelpful. Do you have names?" 1. Felice Rand. Fired aide, a probable lover, and apparently the new queen of the Claymore legacy. Also, a mystery note slipped to our friend Bartlett warning him that someone knew. Wolfe paused. "Did you view a copy of the testament?" "Not yet. But if she really is the main beneficiary, someone in the late senator's orbit might want her out of the picture. That includes his wife, Bartlett, and any number of campaign sharks. There is no if, Archie. There is only confirmation. Acquire a copy of the document or a summary of its contents. We cannot rely on second-hand testimony." "And Rand?" Wolfe exhaled, and I could hear the arm of his chair creak. "Find her before someone else does." That sounded ominous, even for Wolfe. But I'd been thinking the same thing. If Felice Rand had really inherited the legacy of a senator and the enemies that came with it, someone might want to make sure her silence was permanent. I hung up and lit a cigarette, watching the Armitage fade behind the swirling exhaust of a yellow cab. Something told me I wasn't just chasing paperwork. This had the scent of old grudges, expensive cover-ups, and a woman who knew too much for her own good. And if I was right, she was already running out of time. Chapter 4. A Woman with a Vanishing Act. By the time I tracked down Felice Rand, I'd learned 3 things. She'd left her last known address 3 weeks ago. No one at the Claymore Foundation wanted to speak her name aloud, and the only person who admitted to seeing her recently was a bellhop who thought she looked like she'd seen a ghost and wasn't sure if she wanted to run from it or marry it. Which brings us to Wednesday afternoon, a diner in Midtown that smelled like old pickles and fresh regret. That's where I finally found her, sitting in a booth near the back, hunched over a coffee cup like it owed her something. She wore oversized sunglasses, a navy coat a size too big, and a scarf that might have once been fashionable. Still, she had the bones of a woman used to being looked at. I slid into the booth across from her without invitation. "You've got the look of someone who knows the party's over, but the music's still playing." She didn't jump. "Who are you?" "Archie Goodwin. I work for Nero Wolfe." That got a reaction. Her fingers twitched around the cup. "I don't need a detective," she said quietly. "I need a time machine. Sorry, fresh out. But we are good at cleaning up after the wreck." She lowered her glasses, just enough for me to see the storm in her eyes. He told me no one would ever know. Senator Claymore. She nodded once. He said the new will was just to protect me, that it wouldn't come into effect unless something happened. Well, something happened. And now half the city's digging into your past with a shovel and a subpoena. You think I'm after his money? I think you're in danger, I said. And I think someone else thinks so too. She looked past me, toward the window. 3 nights ago, someone tried to break into my apartment. They didn't take anything. Just rearranged a few things on my desk, like they wanted me to know they were there. Message received? I've been staying in cheap motels ever since. Different one every night. I sipped my coffee. It was terrible, but it gave me a moment to think. Why'd Claymore change the will? Her lip trembled. He said he owed me. For what? I helped him bury something. Years ago, a scandal. If it had come out, careers, families, everything would have fallen apart. Who else knew? No one, not even his wife. That was something. But now it's in writing. The will, the bequest, and someone thinks it's a breadcrumb trail. She leaned forward. I didn't ask for the money, Mr. Goodwin. I told him not to do it. And yet you ran when the will surfaced. I ran because I saw what happened to the last woman who got too close. I froze. Who? She looked up slowly. A woman named Marlene Sutter. She was Claymore's secretary before me. She left after a nervous breakdown. 2 months later, she was found drowned in her bathtub. Officially an accident. And unofficially, there were bruises on her wrists, but no signs of struggle. Where can I find her file? Felice reached into her purse and slid a folded sheet across the table. It was yellowed and brittle. A newspaper clipping. Secretary's sudden death stuns Capitol staff. No foul play suspected. You think it wasn't an accident? I said. I know it wasn't. That was all I needed. I stood. Pack your things. You're coming with me. She hesitated. To Wolfe? To someone who won't let you vanish. At least not until we know why someone wants you gone. She followed me out the door, eyes darting, steps light. I kept her ahead of me and checked our backs twice. Once, when we passed a man with a camera hanging from his neck who didn't look like he could tell f-stop from faucet. And once more when we entered the cab that took us back to West 35th Street. Wolfe didn't look up when we entered. He was inspecting a tray of orchids like they'd just told him a dirty joke, and he was deciding whether to laugh. This is Felice Rand, I said. The woman everyone's talking about, but no one wants to find. Indeed, Wolfe murmured. Miss Rand, have a seat. Archie, brandy, for both of us. Felice sat, legs crossed tightly, hands in her lap. She looked like someone on trial before the judge had entered the courtroom. I'm told, Wolfe began, that you're in possession of information that motivated a United States senator to alter his testament. I didn't ask him to, she said quickly. I told him not to. That's immaterial. The fact remains, he did, and now you are the object of unwelcome attention. She swallowed hard. You think someone killed him? No, Wolfe said. I think someone wanted him silenced, and I think they failed to consider the bureaucratic permanence of a legal document. She nodded, slowly. Then you also think I'm next? I think, Wolfe said, steepling his fingers. You've already been marked. The room went quiet. Even the ticking of the old mantel clock sounded like a gavel. I handed Wolfe the newspaper clipping. He read it with one brow arched. Marlene Sutter, he said. The predecessor, the cautionary tale. Felice's voice cracked. She knew about the thing we covered up, but she wanted to tell someone. She said she couldn't live with it. And now she can't live at all, I muttered. Wolfe sighed. We need the contents of that will, the precise terms. The language. I know someone who might help, I said. An attorney who used to clerk for the judge handling the estate. He owes me a favor. Collect it, Wolfe said, "and bring back specifics. We must see the shape of this conspiracy before we identify its tail." I nodded, heading for the door. "And Archie?" "Yes?" "Don't be followed. If Miss Rand was marked, you may be as well." I gave a salute. "If they're tailing me, they'll learn how fast I can double back." I stepped into the night with a list of names, a cold wind in my collar, and the feeling that someone else was already 2 moves ahead. Chapter 5. The Clerk with the Long Memory. The next morning, I rang a bell on a tidy 4th-floor walk-up just off Lexington. A shingle hung by the door. Leon Cantwell, Esquire. Estate law, probate, discreet consultation. I knocked twice, shoved my hands in my coat pockets, and waited. Leon opened the door with the kind of look you give a bill collector who's arrived a day early. His thinning hair was combed with precision, his glasses fogged with coffee steam, and his sweater vest looked like it had been buttoned by someone too distracted to care. "Archie Goodwin," I said brightly. "Remember me?" "Vaguely. You're the one who made my aunt's landlord cry during a rent dispute." "I just asked questions. The tears were a bonus." He sighed. "If this is about a case, I'm retired. And not just figuratively. I'm gardening now. Tomatoes, organic. Then think of this as fertilizer for a withering conscience." He squinted at me, sighed and waved me in. 10 minutes. I stepped into his cramped office/living room and took in the law books stacked under the ferns. "Still keeping the big black book of judicial favors?" "Some entries never get erased." He sat, motioned for me to do the same. "Talk." "Claymore's will." Leon went still. "The original? Or the one rewritten in May?" "That's the one." "Then you're not the only one sniffing around." I leaned forward. "Who else?" 2 days ago, a woman came by. Late 40s, expensive trench coat, sunglasses indoors, asked if I had access to a sealed clause. Said she represented a family trust interested in its integrity. "Did she give a name?" "She didn't have to. I used to clerk in Judge Merriweather's office. I recognize political muscle wrapped in cashmere." "And?" "And I told her I didn't have access anymore, which is mostly true, but I waited. But I remember the structure, the language. Claymore had a clause about posthumous transfer to a non-familial party, contingent upon private correspondence retained by executor." "Meaning Felice Rand?" Leon nodded. "And meaning someone wanted that clause buried." "What else?" "There was mention of a document, a letter, handwritten, sealed and referenced in the codicil but not in probate files, which means it's missing or deliberately withheld. Could it destroy someone? Politically. It could disassemble a career like a mechanic with a grudge." I stood. "I owe you." "You owe me nothing," he said. "Just don't let her end up like the last one." That was twice now I'd heard that line. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was in the plant room with Theodore. When I entered, Wolfe didn't look up from his orchids, but he acknowledged me with a grunt that passed for anticipation. I gave the report, word for word. When I mentioned the missing letter, he grunted again, this time with something closer to interest. "And the language?" I repeated the clause. Wolfe closed his eyes. "The private correspondence. That is the lever. The fulcrum. Felice said she didn't have it. She may not, but someone believes she does." I nodded. "And they're moving fast. She's getting spooked." "As she should. Archie, summon Saul. We'll need a second line of eyes." "Already did. He'll be here in 20. Wolfe raised an eyebrow. "Efficient. Comes from working under pressure." He finally turned, his gaze weighty. "We must acquire the names of everyone who knew of the codicil. Executor, clerks, witnesses, family members. Someone removed that letter before the will was read. And they didn't want it found." "Exactly. And that," Wolfe said, "is motive. Saul arrived just before lunch, trench coat dusted with sleet, expression dry as ever. Wolfe brought him up to speed while Fritz served consommé in tapas, shallow bowls, liquid gold and salt with a kick. Wolfe outlined 3 priorities. 1. Identify the letter and its last known location. 2. Track the woman who visited Cantwell. And 3. Pressure the executor's office through informal channels. "I'll start with the firm," Saul said. "Get a list of who handled the estate paperwork." "Discreetly," Wolfe said. Saul nodded. "Always." After Saul left, I checked on Felice. She was in the guest room, curled on the edge of the bed like a cat in a thunderstorm. Her eyes were wide but dry. She didn't flinch when I knocked. "They're looking for a letter," I told her. "Claymore left one. Not with the will, with someone he trusted." "You know anything?" She shook her head. "He never mentioned it." "You're sure?" "Yes." She hesitated. "But there was one envelope, about a month before he died. He had it hand-delivered to a man named Whitlow. Said it was insurance." "Whitlow?" "Norman Whitlow, a retired prosecutor. Used to play poker with Claymore and 2 senators. You know where he lives?" She nodded. Whitlow lived in a brownstone that made ours look like a shoebox. Old money, newer renovations. When he answered the door, he was wearing suspenders and a bathrobe. "Archie Goodwin," I said. "Looking for a letter." He gave me a tight smile. "You're 3 days late." "Meaning?" "2 gentlemen came looking for it. Told me it was missing. Told me I'd misfiled it." "And had you?" "No," he said simply, "because I'd already burned it." That froze me. "You what?" "Claymore sent it with instructions. Said if he died and the codicil went public, the letter was to be destroyed. Said it implicated people who didn't deserve to survive it politically." I stared. "You're telling me the entire motive in this case went up in smoke because a dead man asked nicely?" "I owed him," Whitlow said, "and he made me promise, under oath." "Some oath." He met my eyes. "I'm 72, Mr. Goodwin. I've buried half my friends and half my principles. This one I kept." I left fuming. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe listened silently as I relayed it. "A dead man's last shred of control," he said. "Very well. If the letter no longer exists, the knowledge of its contents must. You think someone read it before the fire?" "I think someone feared it existed at all. And fear," Wolfe said, "is rarely based on fact. It is based on what others believe the fact might be." "So we find out who believed Felice Rand knew the truth. Then we trap them with their own assumptions. And if they no longer believe she has it, then they will shift their focus to us." I stared at him. "Which means we're next." He nodded calmly. "Yes." Chapter 6. An urgent visitor at dusk. The clock on Wolfe's desk struck 6 with a gentle chime. Outside, the rain that had started as a drizzle now drummed insistently against the windows. Inside, the brownstone's office was a cocoon of quiet tension. Wolfe sat in his oversized chair like an anchor in a sea of uncertainty. I, on the other hand, was pacing, as usual, because some mysteries won't crack unless you walk them to death. I had just returned from Whitlow's house with a head full of burned paper and good intentions. Wolfe had processed my news with the calm of a man who suspected it already. That irritated me, though I admit it was mostly because I hadn't thought of it first. Then, at 6:18 sharp, the doorbell rang. "Archie," Wolfe said, not opening his eyes. "See who it is." "Yes, master," I grumbled, making my way to the front hall. I opened the door to find a man soaked to the bone, trench coat clinging to his lanky frame, fedora crushed in one hand like it had been in a brawl and lost. "Archie Goodwin?" he asked, voice a dry rasp. "That's me." He extended a hand. "Benjamin Dorset. I have something that might get me killed." Well, that's a way to get an invitation. I stepped aside. "Come in, we serve coffee and peril." He entered, dripping like a broken faucet. I led him to the office, where Wolfe looked up from his orchids, took in the man's appearance, and gave a soft grunt, which in Wolfe speak meant, "We are listening," but only just. Dorset took the offered chair, but didn't relax. His eyes darted to the bookshelves, the windows, the safe behind Wolfe's desk. All the places you look when you've been trained to worry about exits. "I worked for Senator Claymore for 11 years, he said. "Speechwriter, advisor, fixer when needed. He trusted me." "So why are you here now?" I asked. He licked his lips. "Because he gave me a key, and I think people are dying over it." That got Wolfe's attention. His eyes opened fully. "A key to what?" Wolfe asked. "A safety deposit box, at a private vault company in Midtown. Not a bank, one of those discreet, invitation-only vaults." He called it the failsafe. Told me never to access it unless he died and something felt unfinished. "And it does?" Wolfe asked. Dorset nodded. "I don't know what's in the box, but I got a call last night, a blocked number, a woman's voice. She said, 'It belongs to the girl now. Hand it over, or we'll take it from her corpse.' Then the line went dead. I stood. "You tell the police?" He looked at me like I'd spoken in Martian. "This is above the police. You think they'll touch a senator's posthumous secrets? They'd bury me under red tape." Wolfe folded his hands over his belly. "Have you told Miss Rand about this box?" I wasn't even sure I should come here, but then I saw a man outside my apartment this morning. Just standing there. No expression. I left by the back and came straight here. "And the key?" He reached into his coat, pulled out a slim black envelope, and handed it to Wolfe. Inside was a long, flat brass key with a series of intricate teeth and the number 7 etched into its neck. "May I?" I asked. Wolfe nodded. I took the envelope and key, weighing them in my hand. Nothing extraordinary, except what they might unlock. "Do you want us to retrieve it?" Wolfe asked. Dorset hesitated. "I want to know what's in it, and I want Felice to stay alive." Wolfe nodded. "Archie, tomorrow morning you will visit this vault. Take Mr. Dorset if necessary. See what Claymore left." I raised a brow, assuming I don't get shot on the sidewalk. "We must all endure something," Wolfe said. Dorset looked at me. "I'll go with you. I think that's what he intended." I nodded. "Fine. You bring the paranoia. I'll bring the sarcasm." After Dorset left, Wolfe and I reviewed the events of the day, the missing letter, the burned confession, the secret vault. It was a real buffet of intrigue. Only the wine was missing. "The key," Wolfe said, "represents both knowledge and leverage. Until it is turned, we are at a disadvantage." "What do you think's in the box?" I think Claymore, in his vanity, wanted to control the narrative of his death. That letter Whitlow burned, it was emotional, but what's in the vault? That will be factual. And actionable? Undoubtedly. Before turning in, I checked on Felice. She was sitting on the edge of the guest bed again, arms wrapped around herself like a girl trying to shrink from a world that kept moving without her. I told her about Dorset, about the key. Her eyes went wide. He trusted Ben. He always said Ben was the only one who didn't try to use him. "Then maybe tomorrow we find out what your uncle wanted to protect." She looked at me, or what he wanted to destroy. That thought stuck with me as I turned out the light. Chapter 7. The Vault Beneath Midtown. The next morning began with rain again, not the poetic kind that makes you reflect on lost loves, but the grey, soaking kind that ruins the shine on your shoes and the crease in your trousers. Naturally, I wore both. Benjamin Dorset met me outside the brownstone just before 9 a.m., trenchcoat buttoned, scarf wrapped, and nerves visible from a block away. He looked like he hadn't slept, and judging from the twitch in his left eye, he'd replaced rest with caffeine and anxiety. "You ready for this?" I asked, unlocking the sedan. "Not even remotely." "That's the spirit." The Vault Company was a discreet little affair on East 47th, no sign out front. Just a marble plaque that said Midtown Security Trust in tiny gold letters. You don't advertise a place like this. You whisper about it in cigar, smoke and scotch at clubs that require a 7-year waiting list. Inside, the reception room was designed for discretion. Soft carpeting, leather chairs, one heavy mahogany desk, and a woman who looked like she could read your financial sins just by glancing at your shoes. "We have an appointment," Dorset said, flashing a laminated card. She took it, glanced at the key, then pressed a silent buzzer. A panel slid open behind her, and a man in a navy blue suit that screamed ex-military, still bench presses for fun, appeared. He gave us the once-over, then nodded. "This way." We passed through 2 security doors, a retinal scanner, and a hallway of cameras before entering the vault area. It was cold, quiet, and smelled faintly of polish and steel. The walls were lined with boxes, each labeled by number. We stopped at 7. The guard stepped back. "You'll have privacy. We'll monitor from the hallway." The door clicked shut behind us. The safety deposit box was about the size of a briefcase. Dorset inserted the key, turned it with a metallic clunk, and pulled the drawer out slowly. Inside was a manila envelope, sealed with red wax. "Well," I muttered, "no gold bars, no bearer bonds, not even a cursed ruby." Dorset broke the seal and opened it. 2 items, a folded letter, not handwritten but typed, and a black and white photograph. He handed both to me without a word. I looked at the photo first. It was grainy but clear enough. Senator Claymore, younger, standing at a podium. Beside him, and here's where my pulse jumped, was Joseph Whitlow. But not as a chief of staff or aide. No, sir, he was in uniform, police blues. A different man, clean-shaven, proud, and wearing a badge. The photo was dated 1989. The location, Queens County Courthouse. "Whitlow was a cop?" I asked. Dorset nodded. "That's what the letter explains." I unfolded it. Wolfe would want the exact language later, so I read it carefully, once to myself, then aloud. "To whoever holds this, if I'm dead and this envelope is opened, it means the truth is too dangerous to bury any longer. Joseph Whitlow was once Officer Joseph Winston. In 1989, he was under investigation for corruption, bribes, evidence tampering, coercion of witnesses. I had him removed quietly, with a handshake and a false name, to protect what I thought was a loyal man. He became my confidant. My mistake. But it was worse than corruption. A young woman, Maria D'Souza, was set to testify. She disappeared. Whitlow was the last person to see her. Her body was never found. I was told it was a scare tactic. I believed it. Now, all these years later, Maria's niece came to me. Her name is Felice Rand. She reminded me that silence makes me complicit. I had my attorney draft a confession, but Whitlow destroyed it. This letter is all that remains. If something happens to me, protect the girl, and give this to someone who knows what justice smells like. Claymore. I lowered the paper slowly. Dorset whispered, "I think Whitlow killed him." I nodded. Maybe. Or maybe someone else did, because they thought this letter would surface. We resealed the envelope and tucked it into Dorset's coat. I took the photo. When we returned to the lobby, the woman at the desk gave us a glance like she knew something in the air had shifted. We didn't talk until we were in the car. "What now?" Dorset asked. "Now," I said. I go to Wolfe. And you stay in the shadows. You think Felice is in danger? She was always in danger. She just didn't know how deep the water was. When we got back to the brownstone, Wolfe was in his chair, sipping beer, glancing at a crossword puzzle like it had insulted his intelligence. He raised an eyebrow as I walked in and handed him the photo and letter. He read in silence. Then, once more. Then closed his eyes. I assume, he said, you've drawn your conclusions? I think Whitlow's got more than skeletons in his closet. I think he's got a full mausoleum. Wolfe nodded. And the photograph? It puts him with Claymore back in '89, long before his reinvention. It means he lied to everyone. Probably even himself. And the D'Souza girl? She's why Felice exists. That's the real origin of all this. Maria vanished, Whitlow stayed clean, and Claymore lived with guilt until it poisoned him. Wolfe opened his eyes. Then we are no longer solving a murder. We are unearthing a cover-up. Same dance, just fancier shoes. He didn't smile, but I saw the glint. That subtle shift when Wolfe stops tolerating a case and starts owning it. Bring Saul Panzer, he said. We'll need eyes on Whitlow, discreet but constant, and contact Inspector Kramer. You want the law involved? I want pressure applied. With precision he leaned back, laced his fingers over his stomach. The web tightens, he murmured, and spiders will show their true colors. Outside, the rain finally stopped. But the storm I knew was just beginning. Chapter 8. A dagger between the lines. The air in the brownstone felt unusually dense that morning, as if Fritz had decided to experiment with brazing fog. Wolfe hadn't come down for breakfast, which meant he was either brooding over his orchids or brooding over human nature. Two pastimes he held in equal contempt and affection. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee, scanning the morning papers, when the doorbell rang with the kind of urgency usually reserved for unpaid bills or lovers on the verge of a breakdown. I opened the door to find a woman in a dark gray suit, her hair tightly coiled and her eyes sharper than a letter opener. She didn't wait for an invitation. My name is Virginia Lannister. I believe Mr. Wolfe will want to speak with me. You'd be surprised how many people think that. I'm Archie Goodwin. Credentials. She reached into her coat and handed me a slim leather folio with a business card and a short letter. The card read, Virginia Lannister, Estate Attorney, Lannister, Wren and Gold. The letter was signed by none other than the late Senator David Carlyle. Mr. Wolfe may not know me, she said, but he will know the handwriting. I took the letter, scanned the scrawl. Stiff, all caps, unmistakably Carlyle's. A brief postscript in blue ink. If anything should happen to me, trust her. I could feel Wolfe frowning through the ceiling. Wait here, I told her, then headed upstairs and knocked once on the door to the orchid room. Who is it? Wolfe called. Archie, a visitor, bearing posthumous praise from a dead senator. That got his attention. 5 minutes later, Virginia Lannister was seated in the red chair, Wolfe looming behind his desk like a sphinx freshly awakened. He didn't offer her a drink or a cigar. Just silence, his preferred interrogation technique. Miss Lannister, he finally said, you have the floor. I suggest you walk carefully. She didn't flinch. Senator Carlyle left behind a handwritten codicil, an amendment to his testament, dated 3 weeks before his death. It names a beneficiary who does not appear in the official record. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. How convenient? For whom? Depends on who finds it first, she said, and who's willing to kill for it. That was enough to make Wolfe lean forward, a quarter-inch closer to what he considered the vulgar world. You believe the senator was murdered for this codicil? I do. And if I'm right, whoever has it now may be planning to destroy it. The original was stored in a personal safe at his summer estate. But when I went to retrieve it yesterday, The safe had been emptied. No sign of forced entry. The housekeeper, a Miss Dana Muir, vanished 2 days earlier. Ah, Wolfe said, and so enters the vanishing woman. Which, I added, we already have one of. The senator's niece, remember. Vanessa Virginia nodded. I've never met her. But if she is the beneficiary, she's in danger. And if she's not, she might be the one holding the codicil. That made Wolfe grunt. Not an approval grunt, but one of those "the plot thickens like Fritz's stew" grunts. And what, he asked, do you expect from me, Miss Lannister? To stop whoever killed David Carlyle, to recover the codicil, and to find Vanessa, if she's still alive. Wolfe tapped his fingers together in a slow, heavy rhythm. A legal puzzle, political rot, a missing document, and a disappearing heiress. All very melodramatic. Archie, fetch Saul. That was the signal. When Wolfe calls for Saul Panzer, it means he's ready to dig beneath the floorboards, metaphorically, of course. Wolfe would never kneel for anything less than a full constitutional collapse. Saul arrived within the hour, trenchcoat impeccable, expression unreadable. Wolfe laid out the details while I fetched the files. He tasked Saul with 2 objectives: locate Miss Dana Muir and check hospital records for anyone matching Vanessa's description in the last 10 days. Emphasis on anonymity, false names, or female patients discharged against medical advice. Saul nodded once and left. No fuss, no flair. That's what you paid Saul for. Silent competence. Wolfe turned to me. Archie, I want you to interview the senator's political aide, the one who arranged his schedule and, according to the obituary, found the body. Julian Sykes. Tall, tense, type A. I remember. Yes, be provocative. Lie if necessary. I want his voice under pressure. Your wish, my alibi, I said, and went to change into something that didn't reek of orchids and existential dread. Julian Sykes had an office on the 4th floor of a downtown building that smelled like cold marble and ambition. His secretary looked like she could kill you with a stapler. He's busy, she said. I'm interesting, I replied. She sighed and buzzed him. 30 seconds later, I was in. Sykes stood to greet me, all professional charm and brittle confidence. Mr. Goodwin, a pleasure, though I suspect not a social one. You're quick, I said. Did that help when you found Carlyle's body? His jaw tightened. What do you want? A timeline. Where were you the night before he died? Home. Alone. Which, legally speaking, means unprovable. Got anyone who saw you not killing your boss? Excuse me. I'm not accusing you, yet. But someone emptied that safe, and someone's chasing a missing heiress. So, Julian, you can either help me or get out of the way. He hesitated. Look, I don't know anything about a codicil, but Carlyle was spooked the last 2 weeks. Paranoid. He thought someone in the party was watching him. Any names? Number. But he made me swear I'd keep an eye on his housekeeper, Dana. She was the only one he trusted. Now we were cooking. And she disappeared 3 days before he died. I filed a missing person report, but nobody cared. She's nobody to them. She's not nobody to Wolfe, I said, and definitely not to me. As I stood to leave, he added, Goodwin, whatever Wolfe is digging into, be careful. Carlyle's secrets don't belong to just him. I left the office with that little warning rattling in my brain pan like a loose screw in a glass jar. Whatever Wolfe was stirring up, the ingredients were turning volatile. Fast. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe listened as I recounted the interview. He nodded slowly, then picked up a small envelope that had arrived by courier while I was out. No return address. He opened it, read the single sheet inside, and handed it to me. One line, typed, "You were warned. Next time." She bleeds." Wolfe leaned back, eyes closing. "We are being tested, Archie, and I do not like examinations I have not prepared for." I folded the note, slipped it in the case file, and looked out the window. Someone out there was getting nervous, and nervous people make mistakes. Chapter 9. The Man with the Cufflink. The morning didn't exactly start with fanfare, unless you count Wolfe bellowing my name before I'd even finished my first cup of coffee. That kind of summons could mean one of three things. A body had been discovered, someone had insulted his orchids, or Fritz was threatening to serve scrambled eggs again. This time it turned out to be a clue, though I didn't know that when I bounded up the stairs to Wolfe's office like I was chasing down a runaway suspect. He didn't look up as I entered. He was at his desk, fingers templed, gazing at the rug as though it might start talking. The air was thick with the scent of his morning beer, which stood untouched next to a manila folder. "Sit, Archie." "I'm flattered, but do I get to know if this is a funeral or a wedding?" Wolfe tapped the folder. "You recall the cufflink?" "I've seen a few. The senator's had an owl. Elegant little gold number." "No," he said, "not the senator's. The one found in the powder room of the Gramercy Club." I frowned. "You mean the one Harriet mentioned?" He nodded. I had Saul retrieve a photo of the matching piece. From a private jeweler in Boston. The set was commissioned 10 years ago. Only 3 were made. One belonged to a man named Roland Tetherby. Sounds like a banker. Close. He's the chief lobbyist for the Consolidated Textile Trust. A man who was, incidentally, at the senator's luncheon. That stopped me cold. Why would Tetherby be anywhere near the ladies' powder room? I leave the vulgar implications to your fertile imagination. But more importantly, he has no business losing a bespoke cufflink in a room he shouldn't be in during an event where a sitting senator was possibly blackmailed and then killed. Wolfe slid the folder toward me. Inside was a grainy photo of Tetherby, silver at the temples, a vague patrician expression, and a scan of the jeweler's registry. I whistled low. "So we bring him in?" "No," Wolfe said flatly. "We press around him first. He's cautious. If he believes he's being watched, he'll vanish faster than your paycheck after a trip to the turf club." I grinned. That only happened once. Twice. Touché. I left the brownstone with Saul's number in my pocket, and a plan Wolfe had drafted with all the precision of a general preparing for siege. My job was to circle the man, find out his habits, his weak spots, his secrets. I started at the Trust's headquarters on Madison. The lobby gleamed with marble and fresh chrysanthemums. I asked the receptionist if Mr. Tetherby was in and received a practiced smile in return. "He's in a board meeting. With God, maybe," I muttered. An hour of loitering and bad coffee later, I caught sight of him striding through the revolving door. No mistaking him, same silver-streaked hair, same air of barely concealed disdain for the common man. He climbed into a Navy Lincoln Town car and pulled away. I followed in the Heron, my rust-colored coupe that creaked like an old staircase but had enough guts to keep up with lobbyist luxury. Tetherby's ride led me through Midtown and then west, finally pulling into a discreet underground garage beneath a private club I recognized as the Garrison. That set off bells. The Garrison was old money all the way. Not the kind of place where one would expect a textile man to spend Tuesday afternoon unless business involved cigars and secrets. I waited. An hour passed. Then 2. Finally, he emerged, but not alone. A young man with the kind of haircut you only get from Fifth Avenue salons walked beside him. They spoke with intensity. The kid was agitated. Tetherby kept one hand on his arm. The kid handed over a slim envelope. Tetherby nodded once and turned away. No handshake. Just business. I snapped a photo from the passenger side mirror and peeled off before anyone caught on. Back at the brownstone, I delivered the goods. Wolfe was watering his orchids but joined me in the office after Fritz bribed him with a plate of veal kidneys. I laid out the picture and told him what I saw. The boy, Wolfe asked, couldn't be older than 22, nervous type, sweating through his collar. Did you see the envelope's contents? No, but I'd bet it wasn't a holiday card. Wolfe grunted. We sat in silence for a moment, then he said, Archie, you must speak to Harriet again. Her account of that day at the luncheon, it's too clean, too rehearsed. There is more beneath her performance. She'll clam up if she thinks we suspect her. She already knows we do. That was Wolfe's version of dry humor. I called Harriet and arranged a follow-up under the pretense of clarifying her statement for Wolfe's files. She agreed, but her voice had lost the polished calm it had the first time. There was something brittle underneath. She arrived at 4. Her perfume preceded her by a full 30 seconds. I ushered her into the office. Wolfe didn't rise. Miss Carroway, he said, you recall my assistant's peculiarities. He prefers detail to brevity. She nodded, settling into the red leather chair like she'd done it before. I need to ask again about that moment in the powder room. I said, did you see anyone go in or out? Even someone you didn't recognize? She hesitated. Not much, just enough. There was a man, she said finally. I thought he was staff, maybe security, but now that you mention it, he didn't wear a name badge. Tall, silver hair, blue tie. Wolfe looked up sharply. I leaned forward. Did he speak? Number just brushed past me. He seemed in a hurry. And what time was this? She glanced at her watch, a nervous reflex. Just after 1, maybe 10 past. That aligned perfectly with Tetherby's window of disappearance during the luncheon. Wolfe drummed his fingers on the armrest. Miss Carroway, you must inform us if you remember anything else. Any detail, no matter how small. She swallowed. There's one more thing. Here it came. I went back later to fix my lipstick, and the envelope, the one the senator had been carrying in his inside pocket, was gone. I didn't need Wolfe's nod to know that was gold. She had seen it, and now it was missing. After she left, Wolfe muttered, "We are closing in, Archie. But now, we must act." "How?" He stood, slowly, deliberately. "We invite Mr. Tetherby to tea." Chapter 10. Tea and Threats. I've seen Wolfe extend an invitation only 3 times in my career that didn't involve either roast duck or the Commissioner's wrath. This was one of them, and it was delivered with the kind of phrasing that made the recipient's spine straighten involuntarily. "To Mr. Roland Tetherby, you are cordially requested to visit my office at 914 West 35th Street this afternoon at 5 o'clock. I would consider it a courtesy if you did not decline. Sincerely, Nero Wolfe." It was simple, civil, and it might as well have been a court summons issued by the Lord Almighty. Wolfe sent it by messenger, not mail. Not because he didn't trust the post, but because he wanted Tetherby to feel the pressure immediately. Sure enough, by 4:30, the buzzer rang, and the great Roland Tetherby stood at our threshold, all pinstripes and polished indignation. I let him in with a smile I reserved for people I wouldn't cry over if they slipped on a banana peel in front of a speeding cab. "Mr. Tetherby," I said. "Right on time. That's always appreciated." "I don't usually respond to summons," he said as I took his coat, "but your employer's name carries a certain burden." He said burden like it tasted sour. I ushered him into the office. Wolfe didn't rise, of course. He gestured toward the red leather chair across from his own. "Mr. Tetherby," he said smoothly. "You are welcome." "I doubt that." Wolfe permitted himself the faintest smirk. "Then let us not waste time." He folded his hands, fingertips pressed together like a steeple. "You were present at Senator Hargrave's luncheon last week?" "Yes, among dozens of others." "Indeed. And you were seen near the powder room at approximately 1:10. Tetherby stiffened. Ridiculous. I'm not in the habit of loitering in women's lavatories. Yet your cufflink was found there. Tetherby's mouth opened, then shut, then opened again. I lost that weeks ago. In New York? Number Boston. Then it migrated of its own volition across state lines and appeared at the Gramercy Club. He flinched. I'd seen this before. The tightening of the jaw, the mental gymnastics as the suspect tries to determine just how much we know and how much we're bluffing. I don't appreciate this line of questioning, he said finally. I came here in good faith. Faith has little to do with it. The senator is dead. His private testament, rumored to contain revelations of national and financial significance, has disappeared. You had the motive, access, and an unfortunate habit of shedding expensive jewelry at inopportune times. Tetherby leaned forward, eyes narrowing. What exactly are you accusing me of? Nothing, Wolfe said calmly. I'm merely pointing out your proximity to a crime. However, if I were you, I would be exceedingly cautious about whom I gave envelopes to in alleyways behind gentlemen's clubs. Boom. He froze. I watched the color drain from his face. It was one of those beautiful moments where you don't need a confession. The silence is louder than a shout. I want my lawyer, he muttered. You may have him, Wolfe said. After you answer one question. Tetherby hesitated. Who else was aware of the testament's contents? A beat passed, then another. Tetherby looked down at his hands. There were whispers, rumors. The senator had been dictating addendums, legal codicils, something about textile monopolies, price fixing. My firm was named. So were others. Blackmail? Number Hargrave wanted justice. He was an old man, and he'd had enough of being a pawn. And he entrusted his secrets to paper. Tetherby nodded slowly. He was meeting someone. A reporter, I think. Harriet arranged it. There it was. Harriet Carraway. Yes. She was helping him arrange a final disclosure. I glanced at Wolfe, who said nothing, just gave the smallest nod, the kind that meant he had just assembled a final corner of the puzzle. Tetherby stood. I have nothing more to say. Good day, gentlemen. He stormed out. I waited for the door to click shut before I turned to Wolfe. So Harriet was the conduit. She is more than that, Wolfe said. She was the gatekeeper, which makes her either a savior or an accomplice. I sat on the edge of the desk. Think she still has the envelope? I think, Wolfe said. She never lost it. Before I could answer, the phone rang. Fritz picked up and transferred it into the office. I answered. Goodwin here. Archie. It was Saul. You're going to want to hear this. I just tailed Harriet to a private bank vault in Soho. She met someone there, not a reporter, a man named Whit Corrigan. Corrigan, the attorney. The same. They argued. He left with a briefcase. She stayed behind. Could you see what was inside? No, but judging by the way he clutched it, it was valuable. And it wasn't cash. I hung up and turned to Wolfe. Corrigan's in it now. Wolfe's eyes closed for a moment. Archie. Call Inspector Kramer. Tell him we are ready to host a gathering. Tomorrow at 11. Bring all relevant parties. All of them? Yes, Wolfe said. It is time we broke the silence with a little orchestration. I stood, already reaching for the Rolodex. Office gathering, huh? Wolfe exhaled. Yes, and I intend to make the walls ring. Chapter 11. The Office Gathering. I've witnessed Nero Wolfe do some theatrical things in the name of truth. Refuse to speak for an entire day, send Saul Panzer to tail a judge, even pretend to be interested in modern art. But nothing compares to the gravity he summons when he hosts an office gathering. He didn't sit in the yellow chair or linger in the plant room. He sat behind his desk, monumental and unmoved, as if the rest of us were chess pieces waiting for his hand. By 11:03 a.m., All the suspects were seated. The brownstone's front room felt less like a detective's office and more like a courtroom, one where the judge had orchids instead of a gavel. On Wolfe's left sat Roland Tetherby, his mouth set like a prison door. To his right was Harriet Carraway, pale and composed in a pearl-gray suit. Saul Panzer stood in the back, arms folded, guarding the door like a detective gargoyle. Also present were Whit Corrigan, who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Georgia Ames, radiating the nervous energy of a woman whose secrets were close to surface. And lastly, Miles Hargrave, the senator's son, flushed with either grief or guilt. Wolfe let silence stretch just long enough to thin everyone's patience. "I thank you all," he began, "for complying with my request, or in some cases, my insistence." Corrigan scoffed. "Is this legal?" Wolfe's gaze cut across him like a knife through aspic. "I'm not the law, Mr. Corrigan. I am, however, an agent of truth. If you would prefer a courtroom, I assure you, one is waiting." That shut him up. I stood just to the left of Wolfe's desk, notebook open, pencil poised, the picture of an obedient assistant. Inside, I was ready to leap if tempers flared. Wolfe continued. "We are here concerning the testament of Senator Hargrave, a document rumored to contain disclosures about corruption, bribery, and monopolistic abuse, allegedly implicating several high-profile firms and individuals." Tetherby's mouth twitched. Wolfe turned to Harriet. "Ms. Carraway, it is my understanding you facilitated a meeting between the senator and a third party for the purposes of disclosure." Harriet gave a slow nod. "He was going to release the document. Publicly. Through a trusted channel." Corrigan interrupted. "That's hearsay. The document doesn't exist." "On the contrary," Wolfe said calmly, "it does exist. And until 2 days ago, it was in your possession." Corrigan bolted upright. "That's outrageous." Wolfe barely blinked. "You retrieved it from a Soho bank vault." Saul Panzer observed the transaction. Corrigan looked to Saul, whose expression didn't move an inch. The silence was damning. "It was a mistake," Corrigan muttered. "I thought it was something else." Wolfe lifted a brow. A briefcase of unsigned papers detailing the senator's financial records. Corrigan's silence deepened. "Thank you," Wolfe said dryly. "Now, Miss Ames." Georgia jumped slightly. "You accompanied the senator on multiple trips in recent months. During one such visit to Baltimore, he met with an investigative reporter. You were present." "Yes, but did you overhear their conversation?" "I wasn't trying to, but yes. He was planning to name names." "Did that frighten you?" She hesitated. "I was afraid for him. Not me." "That's a lie," Miles Hargrave cut in. "She told me Dad was going to ruin our family. She wanted me to stop him." All eyes turned. Wolfe's lips pressed together. "You attempted to intervene?" Miles slumped in his chair. "I went to see him, tried to reason with him, told him we could make it right quietly. And when he refused, I left. That's all." "That's not all," Wolfe said. "You returned later that night." Miles froze. Wolfe turned to me. "Archie." I retrieved a small envelope from my pocket. "This," I said, "is a parking stub, time-stamped, from a garage 2 blocks from your father's house. Your Jaguar was checked in at 11:08 p.m., the same night the senator suffered his fall." "That doesn't prove anything," Miles snapped. "No?" I smiled. "Then maybe your cigarette case, found under his study chair, will do the trick." Georgia gasped. "You said he died in his sleep." "That's what Miles told you," I replied. "We found marks on the floor. Scuffing that suggests the senator fell backward after a confrontation." Corrigan stood. "I want my lawyer." "You already have him," Wolfe said coldly. "Yourself? How convenient." He looked at Harriet. "You were the keeper of the document. Why give it to Corrigan?" She folded her hands in her lap. I was scared. After the senator died, I didn't know who to trust. Witt said he'd protect me. You believed him? I wanted to. Wolfe sighed. So many lies wrapped in desperate half-truths, but the document was never safe with any of you. He turned to Tetherby. You stole it from the powder room during the luncheon. You intended to destroy it. Tetherby glared. I was protecting the firm. You failed. Another silence. Then Wolfe's voice dropped. Saul. Saul stepped forward, holding a black leather folder. This, Wolfe said, is a copy of the testament. The real one. Gasps all around. Harriet stared. But how? The senator, anticipating betrayal, mailed a duplicate to an old friend, Judge Wexley, who in turn forwarded it to me upon the senator's death. Wolfe leaned back, eyes closing briefly. I have read it. It is damning. It is irrefutable. And now it will be released to the public. The room exploded in protest. You can't. This will ruin. Wolfe raised one hand. Enough. He looked to me. Archie, call Inspector Kramer. I nodded and stepped toward the phone. Corrigan made a sudden move toward the door, but Saul intercepted him. I wouldn't, Saul said flatly. Wolfe stood, a rare gesture. You have all lied, schemed, and conspired around a dying man's conscience. That ends now. He sat again. Kramer will do the rest. And just like that, the game was over. Wolfe had timed the summons like an operatic crescendo, early evening just late enough to give everyone a full day of dread to chew on. The office was set in its standard arrangement, which, by any metric of human comfort, meant it resembled a polite courtroom minus the gavel. Wolfe, of course, sat behind his desk with the gravity of a minor deity, and I stood sentinel by the globe bar, hands loose, eyes sharper than they looked. We had the full cast of characters. Monica Danton, all silk scarf and surgical poise, had arrived first, feigning cool irritation, and perched herself far from Wolfe's line of fire. Leland Rowe followed next, pink-faced and twitchy, chewing gum like it was the last form of courage available to him. Cyrus Drummond was all forced affability, smiles like polished brass, insides rattling from some unseen weight. And last, but by no means least, Honor Phipps, dignified in grey, hair pulled back so tight you could see the worry stitched beneath her eyes. The door was shut. The temperature was steady. The stakes were climbing like a Wall Street chart pre-crash. Wolfe spoke without lifting his gaze. Miss Danton, Mr. Rowe, Mr. Drummond, Miss Phipps, I thank you for your punctuality. I detest repetition, so I intend to speak plainly and only once. He paused, as if waiting for a hymn. I have no affection for murder. It is a vulgar solution to complicated problems, but I must thank whoever committed it for providing me with the final clarity I required. Rowe swallowed his gum. I could tell. He tried to cough like it was allergies, but it was a classic tell. Murder? Monica asked, too quickly. Yes, murder, Wolfe said. Let us discard euphemisms. Walter Channing did not fall. He did not miscalculate his footing. He was pushed, deliberately, forcibly, and it was not merely to silence him. It was to gain something specific, something political, something written. Drummond shifted in his chair. This is outrageous. I don't see how— You don't need to, Wolfe cut in, his voice sharp. You need only to listen. He turned slightly in his chair, favoring the side where Honor Phipps sat. Miss Phipps, you were a loyal assistant to the late Senator Halbridge for 9 years. You knew his habits. You also knew his paranoia. He didn't trust banks, nor his colleagues. He kept important documents close, usually in that red folio, which you delivered to Walter Channing after the senator's death. Honor gave a stiff nod. Except, Wolfe continued, when Channing was found dead, the folio was missing, and you didn't report that. You said it had been passed on. I assumed he'd put it in the safe, Honor murmured. No, you didn't, Wolfe said, because the safe had not been opened. You knew it was gone. What you didn't know is that someone else had already opened the folio, read its contents, and panicked. He turned now, slowly, to Monica Danton. The folio contained a codicil, a final amendment to the senator's testament, one that revoked a planned land grant to a consortium and instead allocated that land for public development. You were part of that consortium, Miss Danton. Her lips pressed together like a wallet being zipped shut, but her eyes were jittery. That's absurd. I wasn't even in town when the senator died. You were, in fact, on the East Coast, Wolfe replied, and you arrived at Channing's apartment the very evening he died. You were seen by the building concierge. You claimed to be dropping off a condolence card. Monica didn't deny it. She couldn't. But you didn't bring a card, Wolfe said. You took something. Rowe finally blurted out, "This is nuts. You have no proof." "Ah, Mr. Rowe." Wolfe's gaze pinned him now. "You, too, were in that apartment after Channing's death. You entered not with force, but with keys, one of which you duplicated when Channing left them unattended at the office, correct?" Rowe didn't answer, but he also didn't deny it. That was answer enough. "What you found, however, was not the folio," Wolfe continued. "It had already been taken. What you did find was Channing's datebook, which had, in shorthand, a list of names and meetings, one of which implicated you in leaking donor data to a rival campaign. You panicked, destroyed the page, and in doing so, drew my attention." Cyrus Drummond finally stood up, his voice forceful. "This is a farce. No court would—" "Who said anything about court?" I said, stepping forward. "This is the part where Mr. Wolfe outlines the problem. The police handle the rest." Drummond looked at me like I'd spat in his champagne. Wolfe's voice grew quieter now, but not weaker. "There was only one person who had both the motive to stop the codicil and the access to Channing's trust. One person who stood to lose millions if the land went public. And that person is you, Miss Danton." She exhaled slowly. "You're bluffing." "Number I am concluding," Wolfe said. "Your fingerprints were found on the wine decanter, the one you used to offer Channing a drink before you pushed him. I suspect the residue from the glass will match your lipstick. The police will confirm it tonight." Silence bloomed in the room, a heavy, throbbing silence. "Archie," Wolfe said, "if you would be so kind, inform Inspector Kramer that the matter is ready for him." I pulled out my phone. "I hope he hasn't started dinner." And then Monica Danton stood up. Her face had drained of all pretense, all elegance. She looked like a woman who had bet on every horse and watched each one break a leg. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. The doorbell rang, and Wolfe, ever the host, didn't move an inch. If you've never sat in Nero Wolfe's office when he's about to drop the hammer, allow me to paint the picture. The room was tight with tension, warm with June air and human suspicion, and the scent of Fritz's shad roe fritters still barely hanging in the corners, like smoke from a long-forgotten gun. Wolfe, of course, hadn't moved from his chair behind the desk. His lips formed a straight line, hands clasped over his belly like he was listening to Bach rather than a murder confession waiting to be coaxed from the guilty. The lineup on the red leather chairs was grim. Gloria Trent, her designer sunglasses off now, eyes rimmed with red. Mason Farnham, looking less like a partner at Wexler. Farnham and Lowe, and more like a cornered raccoon. Elise Darrow, the senator's loyal former assistant, sat rigid, staring into the rug as though it might reveal salvation. And Hal Wexler, the dead senator's son-in-law, was a cocktail of irritation and arrogance, legs crossed, fingers tapping against his blazer's elbow patch like he had a date waiting. "You've all been exceedingly patient," Wolfe began, voice as even as his orchid's humidity, "and to your credit, no one has yet drawn a weapon. That shows progress over prior gatherings." "Wolfe," Hal said, leaning forward, "I hope you're not about to suggest that any of us had something to do with Senator Kincaid's heart attack. Because that's what it was, medically. A coronary, yes, Wolfe interrupted. But not one without orchestration. His was a heart that could have outlived a tortoise, had it not been for the meticulous planning of a coward with motive, opportunity, and knowledge. Gloria let out a soft gasp. Elise's eyes widened. Mason blinked rapidly. Wexler uncrossed his legs. I leaned against the wall, arms folded, watching them watch Wolfe. This was the part where the magician pulled out the rabbit. Except in this show, the rabbit was murder. You may recall, Wolfe continued, that I was most interested in the senator's testament, not just its contents, but its transitions. A codicil added last minute, with an urgent reallocation of assets. A portion to be donated to the Metropolitan Legal Aid Fund, another redirected toward an educational grant. Admirable choices, one might say. Which means they weren't his, I muttered. Wolfe glanced at me. That was my cue to hush. Elise Darrow, Wolfe said, his eyes fixing on her. You witnessed the senator's signature, did you not? Yes, she said faintly. He signed it Thursday morning, right before breakfast. You saw the ink dry? She hesitated. He sealed the envelope himself. I assumed that, Wolfe interrupted, was your first mistake. Or rather, your failure to recognize another's cleverness. The document that left this house was not the same document the senator read. Now the room was electric. I'll remind you, Wolfe said, that the senator kept a dictation machine. You, Mr. Farnham, told us he'd dictated a draft, but hadn't finalized it yet. But the version you delivered to his lawyer, post-mortem, had vastly different allocations. What happened? Mason Farnham's voice cracked. I only carried out his instructions. No, Mr. Farnham, you carried out someone else's. The true question is, who benefited from the false testament? All eyes, predictably, turned to Hal Wexler. He shifted. He smiled. That made him look guiltier. Wolfe's voice turned steely. Mr. Wexler, you had motive. The senator opposed your real estate acquisitions. You had opportunity, visiting the house under the guise of reconciliation, and you had access. The blank letterhead from the senator's study, his signature rubber stamp, and just enough legalese knowledge to forge a convincing testament. That's absurd, Hal said sharply. Why would I risk that? To erase debts, Wolfe said calmly, which I believe Mr. Panzer uncovered yesterday evening. That's when I stepped forward and dropped the folder onto Wolfe's desk with a satisfying thunk. Panzer traced 3 shell companies, all linked to Hal's holding group, each funneled money out of the senator's discretionary accounts. The fake testament was a patch, a last-ditch cover-up. The senator was going to expose him. Gloria Trent clutched her purse like it might take flight. Elise looked sick. You didn't mean to kill him, Wolfe said, staring Hal down. You merely slipped the forged testament into his envelope. But you didn't count on his heart condition reacting poorly to the stress of betrayal. I didn't. Hal stood. That's conjecture. You have no proof I was even in the house. Wolfe lifted a hand. We have more than you think. Fritz recognized your cologne from the linen closet. Curious, since you weren't supposed to be upstairs. And Archie found your partial fingerprint on the senator's letter opener. Rather careless, considering. Hal's face drained of color. You can't prove I forged the document. No, Wolfe admitted. But your attorney might wonder why the original testament, recently retrieved from the senator's safe, doesn't match the one you submitted. Hal lunged. Not physically, that would have been too gauche. But his body tilted forward like he wanted to argue, threaten, or perhaps vanish entirely. Instead, he sat back down with all the grace of a punctured balloon. And, Wolfe added, your visit to Farnham's office the day prior, caught on security tape, won't help your case. Silence, the kind that thickens into a verdict. Mr. Goodwin, Wolfe said. I opened the door. Inspector Kramer entered, cigar unlit but ready. Behind him, 2 uniformed officers. Hal Wexler didn't protest. He just stood, smoothed his coat, and walked out like a man who'd lost more than an inheritance. When the door shut behind them, Wolfe reached for his beer. Gloria sobbed once, softly. Elise touched her necklace like it might anchor her. "Ladies and gentlemen," Wolfe said, "you are dismissed." Fritz served the braised duck with a Pinot Noir Wolfe had been saving since 1997, a choice he declared appropriate to commemorate an unnecessary expenditure of mental energy. Wolfe, of course, would never admit that he enjoyed the theatrics, but the smug curve at the corner of his mouth, as he dabbed at his lips with a linen napkin, told me otherwise. "You know," I said, cutting into the duck, "if I were a senator with a secret testament that could destroy a lobbyist cabal, I'd at least have the sense to keep it somewhere other than under a false bottom in a humidor." Wolfe huffed. "You, Archie, would do well to remember that idiocy is not confined to any one profession or tax bracket." We'd wrapped up with Inspector Kramer that morning. The good inspector, jaw locked and mustache twitching, had been forced to concede Wolfe's logic in full public view. It took an hour and a half, 4 handkerchiefs, and several verbal jabs from Wolfe, but eventually Kramer stormed off with suspect in tow, Raymond Wexley, personal aide to the late Senator Collins, now revealed as the man behind the tampered documents, the bribe trail, and ultimately the senator's silent silencing. The real testament, the one naming a chain of front companies channeling illicit contributions, had never been destroyed. It had merely been disguised in Wolfe's favorite medium, misdirection. Wexley, underestimating the importance of a misplaced wine crate, had given himself away with the faintest shift in habit. Wolfe had caught it. Naturally. "I suppose it's poetic," I said, sipping wine. "A corrupt staffer undone by a box of Burgundy." "Don't be crass," Wolfe replied. It wasn't the Burgundy that revealed him, it was the arrogance, the belief that he alone understood the value of secrets. That is always the tell. I let the silence hang for a second. There's a rhythm to these dinners after a case. Wolfe speaks in maxims. I chew thoughtfully, and the whole brownstone breathes again. But this time, something lingered, an unfinished edge, like a comma waiting for a clause. "So you think the Senate Ethics Committee will bury the rest?" I asked. "They will deliberate," Wolfe said, folding his napkin with precision. "Then they will issue a statement, watered down by committee staffers. Some names will be mentioned, others conveniently forgotten." He didn't sound disappointed, just certain. "I suppose we did our bit," I said. "We uncovered the crime," he said. "Justice, such as it is, belongs to the machinery." I nodded, then leaned back and grinned. "So what now? Another chess match with the IRS? A baroness claiming her jewelry talks to ghosts?" Wolfe shut his eyes. "Archie, kindly refrain from inviting nonsense into this house." But there was a knock at the front door. I blinked. Wolfe opened his eyes. I rose from the chair like a man walking into a sequel. It was a woman, young, breathless, and far too polished for the hour. Silk gloves, wide-brimmed hat, and eyes that knew how to dodge questions before they were asked. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, "I need to speak with Mr. Wolfe. It's about my father. He's been missing for 3 weeks, and last night I found a note, sealed with the insignia of the Delphi Club." I raised a brow. "You don't say." Behind me, I swear I heard Wolfe sigh. The kind of sigh that comes not from fatigue, but from the weight of inevitable brilliance yet to be deployed. "Come in," I told her. "Let me guess. Your father was a judge, a lover of rare cigars, and someone tried to steal a silver ring engraved with Latin, right?" She froze. I smirked. "Lucky guess," I said. "You'd better step inside." And as the door clicked shut behind us, the game began again, like it always does. At the brownstone,